My name is Dan Inosanto, and this is the Inosanto Academy of Martial Art. 1946, my uncle was, my Uncle Vince was first taught me my rudiments of what they call Okinawan Te and Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. And that's my first introduction to the martial art, is my uncle. That's about 1946. At that time, when I was in the martial arts, I took it because my father wanted me to do something in the martial arts, so he thought it was really good for my discipline. And I was very fortunate to have my next door neighbor was the judo teacher in Stockton, California. So he was the one who got me into judo. And I just thought it was a real good form of martial art. The martial art was a good form of exercise, and it helped me in the other sports that I participated in. Most of the jiu-jitsu I did at that time was more like self-defense jiu-jitsu, and it was mixed with what they call Te. Later on they call it Okinawan Te, because my uncle had studied in Okinawa, and they call it Te, and then later on they call it Okinawan Te, and then they call it Karate, but the Americans pronounce it karate and karate. But Okinawan Te is the art I studied. It was art from Okinawa, and he mixed that with judo and jiu-jitsu from Japan. And he was Filipino, and he was also the one that sort of got my first introduction into the Filipino martial arts also. Filipino art is sometimes called Kali, and it's called Eskrima, and sometimes it's called Arnes, and a bunch of other names, but those are the primary three: Arnes Limano, Eskrima, and Kali. And those are the basic three. And I was into it, but never really deeply into it until I actually got older, around more like when I was 20, in my 22 is when I really got into it. But I was always around it, surrounded by it, but not really was very interested in it until probably maybe 23, in fact. When I was stationed right after military service, I went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and there I met a man by the name of Henry Slamansky, and his category was, so while I was in the paratroopers with the 101st Airborne Division, I studied karate under the Slamansky. And because there were many different structures coming from different ports of entry into Fort Campbell, Kentucky, I got to study Korean karate and Japanese karate and Okinawan karate mix. And because of the service, you're always sharing what you learn from each other. That's that's where actually I got my training from. And we were always experimenting, boxing versus wrestling, wrestling versus boxing, judo versus wrestling, judo versus boxing. And karate was very, very new at the time, and let's see how karate works against judo or wrestling and boxing. So that's the format which I kind of learned under Henry Slamansky, although that he was a karate man. He was very active. I think in a two-day match in Japan, he defeated 118 opponents in a two-day match. But most people do not know about him because there was no martial art publication. But he's quite decorated as a military hero, both in Korea and Vietnam. He was the first sergeant of the 101st Airborne Division. After that, I got on the military service. I wanted to continue, so I found Mr. Ed Parker, who's considered the father of Kempo karate in the United States. And he got me interested in training with different Chinese systems, so I trained under Professor Long in Kung Fu. I trained with Gordon Derry Solis and Okinawan Te, again here in the Los Angeles area. It was a melting pot. And through Ed Parker in 1964, I met Bruce Lee, and I loved what he was doing because he was very open-minded, and he was sort of like he was kind of a jack of all trades, and he believed in cross-training. And so through Bruce Lee, I began a friendship. He was, at that time, Bruce Lee was my best friend from the years of 1964 all the way to his death in 1973. And I really enjoyed training under him. And at about the same time that I was studying under Bruce Lee, I got very active in training with the Filipino martial arts under La Costa, Ilustrismo, Leo Hurong, Angel Cabalas, Max Menton. My father was a Secretary of Treasury of the Filipino community, so he introduced me to as many as 20 different Filipino martial art instructors. So that's how I got into the Filipino martial arts so much, because of my father. And I just enjoy studying and researching, and that's basically my resume in short.